Well, good morning, everybody. How we doing? All right. My name is Chris Plekenpol. I'm the lead pastor here at Wells Branch Community Church, and I am so glad that all of you are here. And all right, so for those of you that roll in after the music starts and you just got here, I got an important announcement for you. It's not that we're shaming you, by the way. But next week we're starting at 10:45. Everyone, look to your neighbor and say 10:45. That means if you show up at 11, there'll be no coffee for you next week because everyone already, you know how it is if you show up a little late. We have some second service people who down that stuff, so I really appreciate about that. All right, anyway, so 10:45, it's due to the popular demand of you guys were thinking about lunch the whole time you're here, and so we can have more concentration, we assuaged your desire, and we are here for you to get you to lunch earlier. Okay. All right, if you're watching online, I'm so glad you are here, and let us know where you're watching from. And to everybody, if you have a question, like if you're like, I don't know about church, you people are crazy. And in fact, I've got questions. We love your questions. We answer all these questions in our post-sermon podcast, and we'll post it up on the net tonight. So find out more about that at wellsbranchchurch.com. Now, this week, or this Sunday, we're going towards the end of this series called Who's Behind the Curtain, and we've been looking at the book of Esther. And in particular, this week, we're going to be looking at justice, okay? So prepare your head, prepare your heart, prepare your mind for justice. And for us, when it comes to movies or it comes to any part of real life, we love it when justice is served. It like there's something inside just like, yes, we have crushed the enemy. They tried it and they failed, and I want to see the bad guys go down, right? But there's this problem. It doesn't happen all the time like the way we think it should, and that can leave us feeling frustrated, and perhaps, and this is where you go like, listen, if there is a God, then this would be happening. In fact, we have a tendency to feel like God is not just when some things happen. How about this? When unjust people are in high places, that gets frustrating, and you're like, God, if you were in control, then that person would not have that power and make my life this miserable. In fact, do you guys remember this summer? Do you guys remember this? I know our attention spans and our memory, it was really small. But we had the situation with James in Africa. If you guys don't know who James is, he's our missionary in Africa, and his truck like broke down, and he was like, to get to the bush where the unreached people groups are, he'd have to ride his boro, which is his motorcycle, which is always fun, but very painful on your posterior. And so we were like, why don't we come up around and we are going to get him a truck, which we did. Here's the picture of that truck right there. Yeah, it's awesome. And it's in a warehouse, not with James. But it's in Tanzania, which is nice. But James can't drive it yet. And that's frustrating because there's this bureaucratic, corrupt third world government which makes you go, come on, God, don't you understand that James is doing ministry and we need him to get in the vehicle? So I've had to write lots of letters to the bureaucracy, and there's people that want to be paid to kind of move things forward. And it's just the reality of dealing in a world where civil government is like, whatever. And that you just kind of look at that and you're like, God, what happened? Okay, or what about this? Godly people have failed to confront injustice. And we actually saw this last week with Esther, at least from my perspective. I'm watching Esther, I'm like, Esther, you're in the king's palace. Ask for justice. And she's afraid for her life. We talked about that. There's this thing where fear sort of overcomes us, and we don't act in faith, and we don't confront injustice. Or how about this? We experience injustice personally. And so this might be wherever you work, that if you're in the job and you've got the boss who is unbelievably frustrating, or a colleague who plays the email gotcha game, and you've got to have your chain, your proof, and they love to put surprise things on you, and you're like, no, you don't understand. And that sort of thing happens. Maybe it's at work, maybe it's with your spouse, and maybe it's not another person. Sometimes things and circumstances happen where it feels like it's not fair, like the scale sort of gets tilted against us, and here we are left with a feeling of like, What is going on? And in fact, over the past couple weeks, our elder chairman, Dave Sheffield, and his family found some just really hard news to handle, is that their son, Aaron, who's just turned 21, has been diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma, which I don't even know what that means, but it just means that there's a mass in his body that is cancerous and the bad kind. Now, it's curable, which whenever people say it's curable, I'm like, well, why do we have to do cancer in the first place? And so there's this part of, listen, Dave and his family have been serving in this church, serving God for a long time. And for me, I'd be like, God, listen, I've been playing at the church. I've served as an elder. I've gotten all the emails, all the people wondering why things are like this, and what, all the conversations, all the frustrating, like people aren't always happy. And I know it's shocking, right? And so he's endured all that for the sake of moving the gospel forward. And yet here God, what are you doing? It seems like you tipped the scales the wrong way. How about back this way? And so this morning we're gonna be praying for Dave and his family as they watch and pray and have to put trust in God even over medical doctors. But I think if we're honest, we've all been in a space where we've just been watching the world going like, it's not fair. We've all been there. And so this morning we're going to be getting into the book of Esther again, and we're going to be watching what God is doing. And if you're not familiar, if you're like just joining us, let me just kind of show you how the scales of injustice have sort of worked in the book of Esther. It starts off with this drunken, happy king, King Xerxes. You guys might have known him from the movie 300. And he has this unbelievable, awesome party for 6 months. And at the end of that 6-month party, he wants to show off his wife and to have all his best friends, all of his 1,000 best friends come in. And he's like, hey, get Queen Vashti in here. I want to show everybody how good looking she is. And then so she's like, I'm not going to parade myself in front of your drunken friends so they can lust after me. And he's like, oh yeah, well I banish you to permanent widowhood. And so there she goes. She's now in solitary confinement. She's not dead, but her life and her promise of the palace is now looking a little bleak. And then the replacement for her is Esther, who wins a beauty contest. And she performs really well for the king. He chooses her. And, with some connections, he helps her cousin Mordecai get a job at the king's gate, which means he was a colleague of the prime minister. One day the prime minister walks out and, you can tell anybody you have to command. In this culture, bowing to your elders or people in power was just like everybody did. You would never have to command anyone to do it. But this guy was such a jerk that he had to command, the king had to command people to bow to him, all right? So if you're just wondering how it is, if you've been to the Near East or the Far East, everybody bows auto. It's auto bow. But here's Mordecai. He's like, that guy is a dirtbag. I ain't bowing to that guy. And so what this Haman says, oh, you ain't going to bow to me? Fine. Mass genocide for all your people. I'm not going to just kill you. I'm going to kill everybody that you love. And anybody that you might have thought of loving, and anybody who might have thought of loving you, the entire race of Jews are going down. And so that's where we kind of open the book, and it's like, what is going on here? And then in the midst of this, Queen Esther is given an opportunity to come before the king. She's terrified to do it. And if you come before the king uninvited, there's a chance you could die. And so she does, and the king says, hey, I'll give you anything you want, up to half the kingdom. And at that moment, I'm like, Queen Esther, ask him. Like, tell him the deal. And she's like, come to another party. And you're just like, what? And so there's this part of me that watches this whole thing unfold. And it's difficult. And especially when you're like, God, how are you working through this? Well, the bizarre part of the book of Esther, maybe you guys didn't know this, is God's name is not mentioned once in the book of Esther. Like, you'd think that'd be kind of weird for a Bible. Like, looking for God in here, ain't in here. No, the reason why, it's a literary device that sort of creates a hole where God is, it's like, all these coincidences, all these things keep happening, and it's kind of helping out the people of God. Who could possibly be behind all these coincidences? And obviously the answer would be God, because you're at church. But in this time, people were kind of looking, what is God doing? Because it's not like they're in Jerusalem. They're not even not even in Babylon. They're in Susa, Persia, like modern day Iran is where they're all hanging out. And so we're going to watch as Esther is going to have to plead for justice here. In fact, that's where I want you guys to see this, is you're going to watch Esther, quick outline. She's going to plead for justice, then the king is going to come through. Then she's going to plead for justice again, and guess what? The king's going to come through again. And we're going to watch this, a model for us of how God operates even when it feels like things aren't fair. You guys with me? That's where we're going this morning. Would you guys mind praying with me as we open up God's Word? Father, I'm so grateful that you are in our midst and that you're here. And Lord, I know that people have come with all sorts of baggage, whether it's in their marriage, whether it's a sickness, whether it is a frustration with work, or just the potential of things going really poorly or really badly. And God, I'm begging you and I'm pleading with you. Would you open up your word to speak to people at the place where they're just feeling like unjust stuff is going on all around them? And Lord, for what you've taught me this week in my preparation, would it be able to be clearly communicated so that people could hear from you and not just have a bunch of words from a pastor? Lord, do your work this morning. Holy Spirit, would you speak? It's in Jesus' name we pray, and everybody said, amen. All right, here we go. We're in Esther chapter 7. If you don't have a Bible, do me a favor. Look in front of you. There should be under a chair there a Bible. If you don't have a Bible at all, it's our gift to you. Merry Christmas in November. Happy Thanksgiving. We want you to have a copy of God's Word. And we're on page 414 of the Bibles that you have. And we're in Esther 7. And what has just happened is Haman has just paraded Mordecai around the city square saying, this is what the king does for those he delights in. And he's unbelievably humiliated because he just made a gallows to hang Mordecai on. He ends up having to parade around the city telling everyone how great he is. So things aren't looking too good for Haman. And now all of a sudden he's called to the party with Queen Esther and the king. You guys ready? So the king and Haman went in to feast with Queen Esther. And on the second day, they don't do parties like we do them. They're not like hour, 2 hour, 3 hour long parties. Like their Christmas parties last for a couple days because they know how to party right. And as they're drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, and this is like about the third time he's asked this question, and she's just kind of delayed it. What is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you, and it shall be fulfilled. What is your request? Up to half my kingdom, whatever you want. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted for my wish, and my people for my request. And he's like, what? For we have been sold, I and my people. And watch this. She's going to phrase this with the exact wording from Esther chapter 3, verse 13, where Haman had written this out. So she's kind of quoting from the decree. I and my people to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. In other words, we're about to be dead, me included. Now, and then she's going to preface this. Now, if we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent. For our affliction is not to be compared with. Now, this is genius. She's speaking to the vanity of this king who is just so in love with himself that he can't even stand it. So our affliction, us being, made slaves, is not to be compared with the loss to the king. In other words, remember when Queen Vashti, awful thing there, and she wouldn't respect you because clearly I do, and then you banished her, and then you had the beauty contest. Remember that? And I won, and it was and you were bragging about how beautiful I was. I was the most pretty one in the whole kingdom, and you're going to look really dumb because you just had this whole competition for nothing because they're going to kill me. To which, well played, Esther, well played. And then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, who is he? And where is he? Who has dared to do this? I mean, the anger is just flared up, and Esther's like, oh, that was too easy. And Esther said, a foe and an enemy, the wicked Haman. To which Haman's like, what? Then Haman was terrified, as you imagine, before the king and the queen. He's had a bad day from having to parade around his arch enemy around the city square, saying, this is who the king delights in, to even worse. He's terrified before the king and the queen. And the king arose in his wrath from the wine drinking and went into the palace garden. Now, here's what's going to happen. He needs time to think. That's why he gets up and he leaves. Because he understands. I mean, he might be a drunken fool, but he's able to put this together, that the very law that he signed into law that he did was crafted by Haman, his prime minister, who has now sentenced his wife and queen to death. And it looks like he's going to be the biggest fool in all the kingdom. And the weird thing about the law, the Medes and the Persians, that anything that the king signed the law could never, ever, ever be revoked, which helped a king not do dumb laws like this one, which he didn't get the memo on, all right? And so that was sort of the whole point. So now he's stuck. What do I do? Now watch. This is an interesting thing. So he goes to the palace garden, but Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther. Now this is a big deal, because what would happen in this time if you were a man who still had a reproductive capability? All right, you weren't a eunuch. You weren't allowed within 7 feet of the queen, okay? And you were never, ever, 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 by any circumstance, allowed to be alone with the queen. So when the king gets up, it wasn't just like, oh, customary tradition, I'm going to exit stage left and go get a cup of coffee. No, it was like, your life is in your hands if you do not leave when the king leaves. And maybe he's like, king looks kind of angry. I will give him some space. I know Queen Esther seems like a reasonable person, and she can change his mind. So he starts begging for his life from the queen, for he saw that harm was determined against him by the king. And the king returned from the palace garden. After a couple moments, he just has a little pacing moment to the place where they were drinking wine, as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, will you even assault the queen in my presence in my own house? And as the word left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. That's when they get the black pillowcase. They put over his head, get the zip tie, and he's heading to a CIA black site. All right, and so it's over for him. He's done. Then you got to love this. This is how much everyone thought that Haman was a dirtbag. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, moreover, the gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, remember how he was like your hero, you just paraded him around everywhere, is standing at Haman's house 50 cubits high. That's 75 feet high. And the king said, fitting, hang him on that. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the wrath of the king abated. And on that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. Hey, this is my cousin. He raised me. You should love him. And the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. In other words, listen, he's a drunken king who makes really odd decisions. And so he just, in a moment, makes some guy he just met the prime minister, whatever, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And this is beautiful. Haman received poetic justice. And we love poetic justice, don't we? Well, I mean, it's just fun. I read this story this morning. It happened about a couple months ago in Washington. I think Kennesaw, Washington. So this guy is robbing, he's going to do a smash and grab robbery of a store. So he parks his truck, leaves the car running, goes across the street to do the robbery. And then while he's robbing the store, some kid on a 10-speed sees the car running, drops the 10-speed, hops in his truck, and steals his truck. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, right? And then the best part is the guy files like a stolen vehicle report, and they're like, wait a minute. We'll just take you in right now. I mean, it was just awesome. Like, we love poetic justice. That's like beautiful, right? You're like, he deserved that. Haman, man, that's awesome. He had a plot to kill off an entire race of people, and he now dies on the very gallows he had made for this arch enemy. Hallelujah. And we love it when Haman goes down. We love that story. It's like a little happy feel-good. Now, here's the problem, and this is the part I don't want to get too personal. We don't ever see ourselves as Haman. Because as you're sitting here, I'm telling the story, you're like, yeah, get him. And then the person that's been sort of like against you or giving you a hard time or like has been this injustice, you've been thinking about them the whole time. And what's odd or what's weird is that there might be somebody thinking about like that about you. Is that weird? And we don't like that. Listen, Chris, let's keep it happy on the up and up. This is like, remember, the Jews aren't dying now. That's good. No, but the problem is we love instant karma, so to speak. You know, you guys seen those videos where the kid goes to push somebody else in the pool and then he falls in? We love instant karma. The problem is we don't want instant karma for us. We want everybody else judged by their actions and us by our intentions. That's how we roll. And so why, and this gets back to how God works with grace, right? You don't get what you deserve. Because if your thoughts, I mean, let's think about your thoughts. All the things you've dreamt of, lusted over, your heart has kind of been dark, all the times you've thought about murder. Okay, not murder, they just accidentally died and you just kind of enjoyed the benefit of it. Or like whatever those dark thoughts, all the dark words that you said that you thought would never get out, if those were exposed, then everybody there would be like, I hope he gets what he deserves. But you didn't. Why is that? And I want us to tap into this thing where God doesn't do instant karma because he's wanting to teach us, and we have to learn something about his grace. But we all know that perpetual grace with no justice isn't love. Like if there's no justice, well, that can't be love. And this is where one of my favorite Martin Luther King quotes is this: power without love is reckless and abusive. However, love without power is just pure sentiment, and it's anemic. There's nothing to it. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. And so then the question is, because you've been Haman, you've been that guy, how does God satisfy his desire for justice, because he's a just God who's all-powerful and yet all-loving, and our need for mercy? Now, Esther is going to show us how in this next part. Check this out. So, remember, we've got Haman's been executed. Mordecai is now prime minister, and there's a time that passes in between verse 2 and verse 3. Then Esther spoke again to the king. We've talked about this over and over, that for Esther to go before the king uninvited was essentially putting your life on the line, because if the king got annoyed with you or was having a bad day, he'd say, like, listen, I'm tired of her with all of her whining and her questions. We want, listen, can I just have a house and peace? Stop asking me questions. And she does something that is unthinkable. She fell at his feet and wept and pleaded with him. You don't cry before an ancient Near Eastern king. You don't cry unless he tells you to cry. I'll tell you when you feel sad. That's sort of how it went in that culture. And yet she's crying and pleading with him to avert the evil plan of Haman the Agagite and the plot they had devised against the Jews, which here's why this is tough. He can't. Remember, once a law is put into place that he signed, you can't reverse it. So she's asking for the impossible. Now, we're going to watch this. When the king held out the golden scepter to Esther, Esther rose and stood before the king. And she said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and if the thing seems right before the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the provinces of the king. And then she says this: for how can I bear to see the calamity that is coming to my people? Or how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred? You see, Esther identified with her people to plead for justice. You see, Esther has this faith muscle that she keeps exercising. Remember at first in chapter 3, and when Mordecai's like, listen, we're all going to die. You've been put in the palace for such time as this. You need to go and say something. And she's like, listen, I've been called the king in 30 days. I must have not done something right 30 days ago because, he's sleeping with somebody and it ain't me. And so there's this moment where she's sort of terrified, and then she comes to this place, she says, if I perish, I perish, and she goes, and she doesn't die. And then she learns the favor of the Lord, and she learns to trust in God as she fasts and she seeks God. It doesn't say that specifically that she's praying, but we all know that she is, because that's how the literary device of God not being mentioned, we know that when she's fasting, she's praying. And then she says, I want to identify myself with the people. It's the classic. If you fire them, you fire me. If you kill them, you kill me. And that is going to go bad for you because you are going to lose all that honor. And people are like, what is wrong with you? I had a moment that was sort of similar to this when I was at West Point. So for those of you guys who don't know, I was in the Army. And before that, I was at United States Military Academy. And your life is just hard. That's the best way to put it, all right? And whenever you get in trouble for something, the way that you get punished is they take away your most valuable commodity, which is time, okay? Because you would do on average, you guys, I think in normal colleges, they do 12 to 15. Like, if you're doing 15 or 18 hours, that's crazy, right? Oh, my gosh. Well, the minimum of hours I did was like 22, and usually about 24 hours a semester. So it was just a different world. And so what happened to you if you got in trouble, right, is they would make you dress up in your full parade gear and walk back and forth across the area for hours. You just do this. And you get to think about all that you did wrong. Back and forth. And so what had happened, and my offense is going to be unbelievably grievous. You'll just be like, wow, you were an awful person. So I was a plebe, and so a freshman. And we all were going to a football game. Like the whole Corps of Cadets was going to the Notre Dame Army football game, which was going to be at the Meadowlands. All right, so everybody had to sign up, which to me, I was like, just using logic, why would I need to sign up if it's mandatory for everyone to go? That was my thought. I was like, I'm not going anywhere else. They tell me where to go. They tell me where to eat, where to drink, where to sleep, where to use the restroom. Why would this be any different? I don't have to sign up for any of that, right? So I don't go online and I don't sign up. And then a note comes down. You've been given 5 hours that you have to walk on the area. And I'm like, for what? It was like, yes, sir, thank you. That's kind of how that went. And so I go down, I get all dressed up, shine my shoes, shine all my brass. You had a lot of brass you had to wear. Get my rifle clean because it gets inspected because you have to spend a lot of time looking right to waste 5 hours on concrete. So anyway, I'm there, and my team leader, Cadet Hay, or Marcus Hay, that was his name, he's there. And I'm like, man, this kind of like, what are you in for kind of question, And he was responsible for me. He was my team leader. He was a sophomore. I was a freshman. And I go, hey, sir, what are you in for? What are you here for? He's like, when you didn't sign up, I got the hours. And listen, this bureaucracy of the government is the same everywhere. So I hadn't actually walk hours for like a couple weeks, right? And so he never brought it up. He just stood out there and he just walked alongside me in silence. Because he identified himself with me. He never said, it's not my fault. It's all, he's like, listen, whatever is your fault's my fault. I own that. I'll never forget that. That meant so much to me. And that was a picture, sort of. What Esther does is a picture, sort of what ultimately how God would deal with justice and mercy and how we need it. In fact, one of the reasons we celebrate communion regularly is because we need to be able to wrap our heads around this. You see, Jesus identified with us. Do you guys know that? He who knew no sin became sin on our behalf so that we might be the righteousness of God. And before he goes to the cross, he's hanging out with the disciples. It's called the Last Supper, right? And he takes bread, he breaks it, he gives it to his disciples saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In other words, identify yourself with me because I'm identifying myself with you. And I will exchange, watch this, I will exchange my righteousness for yours. And it's not that we just go to hell with him, but rather he goes into hell for us. And while he's on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? He takes our sin away. And that's why when we take communion, we have wine. Wood for wine, glass for grape juice. Because on the night before he was betrayed, he said, this is my blood shed for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sin. Do this in remembrance of me. In other words, identify yourself with me because I'm identifying myself with you. I'm going to take on your sin and you're going to take on my righteousness. And that's why we take communion. For those who are believers, for those who trusted what Jesus did for them, that's why we do that. Because we're getting to see how the intersection of justice and mercy intersect at the cross. And that's the stuff that makes you cry and weep. That's why we write songs about it, because it's an unbelievable, unfailing, all-powerful love that loves us so much that it wraps us up and it says, I'm going to trade you and give you what you don't deserve because I love you that much. And so that's how God deals with this thing where we deserve justice, but he gives us mercy because he takes on the justice of God for us. And that's why it's called amazing grace, because like the it's okay grace is like, I'll let you off, but you got to do something for it. Amazing grace is I take all your sin away and leave you with just this unbelievable gratitude that you have in your heart. And so here is Queen Esther, and she is identifying herself with her people. And so let's watch how this situation sort of ends. Watch, verse 7. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai, the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he intended to lay hands on the Jews. But you may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king and seal it with the king's ring. For an edict written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked. Remember, that's why we're in this mess in the first place. He gave his ring to somebody else. They wrote a law, and it put a genocide on the calendar. And now he's giving him his ring. He said, listen, I'm not smart to figure this out. Mordecai, go for it. You figure it out. And then Mordecai, verse 10, wrote in the king of Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's signet ring. Then he sent the letters saying that the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather and defend their lives. And he's going to use the same verbiage, watch, from Esther 3:13 is going to be used right here. To destroy, to kill, and to annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, children and women included, and to plunder their goods on one day throughout the province of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. To which whenever I read that, I'm like, eee. But remember, it's not that he's trying to kind of like plunder and take over all the bad guys, but rather this counters exactly the Haman's edict in Esther 3:13, putting the Jews on equal footing with the rest of the world. So all of a sudden, there's this part at which he makes it fair. He can't revoke or undo the death sentence, but he can at least even out the tables. He can at least even it out. And so that's what there's like, you're able to defend yourselves and have arms and battle. Then, verse 15. This next part's huge, and if you'll miss it, if you just, whenever you read the Bible, sometimes you're just like, whatever. Mordecai went out in the presence of the king in royal robes. No, I want you to read this. Then Mordecai, who is a Jew, who got a job as a clerk at the king's gate, where all the prime minister people work, now is dressed in royal robes of blue and white, and with a great golden crown and a robe of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. Honor. Remember before it was very bad to be a Jew because you were marked for death. Now, in every province, in every city where the king's command and his edict reached, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday. Now watch this. And many from the peoples of the country declared themselves Jews, for fear the Jews had fallen on them. It's like you're like, wait a minute. If you treat the Jews poorly and tried to kill them all, then somehow somebody is going to reorient the entire power structure and put the Jews in charge and kill off anybody who tries that. So everyone's like, I'm going with the winners. The thing I love about this is that God's people grew through injustice. Now, this is something to think about. Where is Christianity growing the fastest in all the world? Do you guys know? It's not China anymore. It's Iran. Guess where this is? Iran. God's people are growing faster in Iran, where pastors are being imprisoned and jailed and killed for anything that might propagate the faith of Christianity. Now watch. Why is it growing? Why were people then declaring themselves to be Jews? Why? Why would you do that? Because you saw the hand of the Lord working. And you're like, I want to be on whatever side that is. I don't care what it costs me, because someone who is in charge of life and death has greater power than anybody that can just kill the body but not kill the soul. And so this becomes something really powerful around the world. If you're in Iran, if you're in China, if you're around the globe, the numbers grow, but also the faith deepens. I think throughout this, you watch Esther go from a little girl who's just willing to do whatever she's told to a woman of God who's able to stand in the gap for an entire nation. And so this is the part where I want you to kind of wrap your head around this. Because wherever you are, you might be going through injustice. And the question is, will you grow through it? Will you grow? Will your faith grow? And by that, would others see your faith growing and grow as well? And this is why I think it's so important for us to be praying for the Sheffields as they're sort of watching cancer descend and experiencing that sort of like unbelievable sensitivity to a sickness that it's not fair. And so what I'm wanting us to do as we're watching the Sheffields as Christian leaders walk their son through cancer, they're going to have to be leaning into the Lord, not trusting in doctors, not trusting in chemo, but trusting in the Lord. Because he's the only one that can raise anybody from the dead. Because here's the reality. Everybody here is terminal. Do you guys know that? Nobody here is going to... The miracle drug hasn't been found where you don't die and you don't age. I don't care if you're 21 or 91 or 1. There's going to be a time which your life here is going to end. And I promise you that the way the Sheffields walk through this is going to be echoed through all the halls of the office where Dave works at IBM. It's going to be echoed through the homeschool co-op where Kelly is a vibrant part of. It's going to echo everywhere they go. They're going to say, that's how you deal with cancer when it comes near. And I know this has been something that Dave has already been thinking about, because I know it's already happened, because his attitude at IBM has been seen. In fact, John Zhu, who was here first service, he told me that one day I was just feeling in despair. And I looked over at Dave, and he looked like a Christian. I don't even know what that means. I got to go talk to that guy. And Dave prayed with him. In the midst of the confusion of trying to figure out life, of being overwhelmed by circumstances and needing help. Eventually, everybody comes to a point of crisis. Everybody comes to Christ in a crisis. You guys know that? And that's why you make a lot of friends. Wait for the crisis. It's coming. And so what I want you to do during this time, if you're not a Christian here this morning, in the little bulletin thingy that you got handed as you walk in, there's this little connection card. And if you're in crisis, or if you're in a thing where it's unjust, would you put that prayer request down, and we will pray for you. And if you're not a Christian here today, you're like, but maybe God's working on your heart saying, maybe you need to trust in Jesus today. There's a little thing that says, I want to receive Jesus as my Savior. Check that off. And it's simple on how you become a Christian, but it'll change everything about you. To become a Christian, you simply believe that Jesus died on the cross for your sins and rose from the dead. That's how you become a Christian. And your trust and your faith isn't in your circumstances, but in the God who controls life and death. Your trust and your faith isn't in your own skill and ability and your ability to positive think your way out of stuff. It's in a God who's in control of everything. And so my heart for you this morning, if you don't know Jesus, is that you would come to him. And if you do know Jesus, my heart for you is that we would watch God grow your faith as you would see the balance of the scales always tipped in your favor, because Jesus took on the wrath of God for you, so that no matter how it feels when circumstances are unfair and it seems like it's just broken, that God would say, no, don't you worry, I got you, because you're my son, you're my daughter, and I'm going to take care of you. Even through cancer, even through divorce, even through unbelievable amounts of pain. And that's why we pray. And that's why we sing. Because we have no other choice and no other place to go than to our Father in heaven. So we're going to do something this morning. We got a couple things going on. One, we have a baptism of Joey we're really excited about. But I want to invite my prayer team up. And if you are not a Christian here today, if you would like to come and talk to somebody about that, of what that means. And I'm also going to ask for Dave and Kelly and Caleb and Leah, would you guys come up, and we're going to pray for you over here. And if you know the Sheffields, if you want to lay a hand on them, if you want to ask God to bring healing to Aaron and this family, I entrust that. I'm going to ask our elders to do that if you can, because this is a very powerful time as they're walking this journey out on the day that cancer visited close. And I want us in the fight on our knees right beside him. And so we're going to be doing that this morning. Would you guys pray with me? Father, you are in control. You do things that we don't even understand, we can't wrap our head around, but we know wholeheartedly that you are the God in control of the life and death span of people, that a sparrow doesn't fall to the ground apart from your will, that nothing happens without your say. And so, God, we know that, we believe that, we know you're in charge of cancer, we know you're in charge of presidents and kings, we know you're in charge of bosses and wives and husbands, we know you're in charge of children. So, Lord, wherever we're at, we know you're in charge. And so, God, we're coming to you. We're asking for healing for Aaron, but we're asking for healing in people's hearts. And, Lord, would you do a work this morning as we come for a time of prayer that we would sit here, God, we would watch you minister to some people that need you. Lord, and I'm praying that somebody for the first time would come up to one of these prayer teams and say, like, I'm ready. Jesus, save me. I can't do it on my own. I trust in you and what you've done on the cross for me. Father, I'm praying that for those who do believe, as we prepare our hearts for communion, you would just, if there's anything we're wrestling in doubt, if we're wrestling with that you couldn't do it, God, that you would just let us have a time of confession and repentance to truly trust in you, and then allow us to take communion in joy, knowing that you are in control. We love you, God. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.